So what's up, everybody? This is BSP. I got a subject for y'all today. Yes, I do, and this is going to be part of my um, living and working in Japan series. I'm going to start up here. This is probably, you can name it part one, episode one, whatever you want to call it. I'll put it at the end of the title. Let's drink some of this canned coffee here. They got some good canned coffee over here in Japan, man. You can get all kind of stuff. I love the vending machines here. I love them, love them, love them. You know, I can get anything anytime I want. I walked into a convenience store too, and because we have the best convenience stores in the world, and there's one right down the street from my house. And I went there, and they got this. This coffee's pretty hot. I said, "Oh yeah, I like it nice and hot when I grab it." So, when I'm drinking it, it won't be getting all cold on me real quick. So anyway, today's subject is going to be English teaching has no future in Japan. Yes, I'm finally talking about this because I know I got a lot of requests to talk about this English teaching from people around me, people that want to come to Japan, things like that. And once again, I'm in my car here up at the top of the hill, one of the hills. We have many hills, but this is the one that's closer to where I'm going to live. This is the birthplace of skiing here in Japan. And you see me doing videos lately in my car because the weather has been, right now we're going through typhoon season, and although this side is not getting hit with the typhoon, the Tokyo side is, not the Sea of Japan side. But what happens is that band, man, it can get pretty wide, and it's throwing a lot of nasty humidity our way right now, so it's really muggy out. It's cloudy, but it's muggy, right? Or it gets sunny, and that's why I got my shades on, because sometimes it's bright, like, whoa, out of the blue. So that's what we're going through right now. And then it's been really hot, so that's why I'm trying to soak up this AC in my car. But eventually, I want to get back out there and do my walk and talk, because I like to do walk and talk too. When my new house gets built, I'm going to be doing a lot more videos from there. I'm actually going to start doing live videos here at the beginning of next year, so that way I can get some input from my peeps live. The reason why I don't do it where I live now, man, the internet is horrible where I'm at. I can't hook up my routers because it doesn't have the 3-prong plug. It only has one place where I can plug in a 3-prong plug, and my router is like that because I got it imported from the States and I can't plug it anywhere. And there's no way for me to really get it all routed up. So I just got to wait to get my house. So today's subject, okay, so yes, like I said, English teaching has no future here in Japan. Now, I'm going to go into my experience of teaching English, and then I'm going to go off of what I know. So, I was stationed in Okinawa, and, in the 80s and the early 90s, mid-80s to early 90s. And I was in college at the time, because what I did in the Air Force, I went in, and then the Air Force paid 75% of my tuition. So for 4.5 years, I went to school every night during school, whenever school was in session, and I got my college degree. I got my bachelor's over there. First, I started off getting my associates, then I got my bachelor's. But this was around 87. This is when I just started school, and I was looking to make some extra income because, like I said, the military wasn't really paying me as much as they needed to pay. We were in the middle of the bubble economy, and I wanted to be able to get out there and have some fun. So I remember walking around a place called, Naha City, which is the biggest city in Okinawa Prefecture, the capital. And I was walking around Shuri Castle area, where I really love walking around there. I just like the scenery, the hill. You can see the city. It's just nice. I just really liked it. And they have a really nice Okinawan pottery museum type store type setup right there, which is really fresh. You walk in, it's a really good feeling. So after I came out of there, I heard these women looking at me, and they said, "Oh, he must be an English teacher." And that was the first time I heard that, because usually when they look at me, they think, in Okinawa, they already automatically think that you're a military. And at the time, I was in the Air Force, and, I'm proud I was in the Air Force, but I didn't want to always be associated with military when I was away from work. So that put a bug in my head, and I was like, oh, maybe I should teach some English on the side. So So what happened was I got, I knew a few Okinawans there, and they hooked me up with some students from their job. I remember because it was 4 guys I started teaching. That was my first group of guys, first class. And then I got one student there with her daughter that I met up with. This lady and the daughter, very nice lady. Very nice lady. I'm going to say her name, and I hope if she ever watches this video, I just want to tell her I love her. I'm really, really happy about her. Her name was Sachiko Moriyama. And, her daughter was there too. And so her daughter was like 15, 16 at the time. And I remember because I put them in the same class as the guys. And I remember she was intimidated. She was crying. The daughter was 15 years old, crying at the same time. And one thing I don't know about Okinawan girls is they're 15, but they're actually really like 13 or 12 because they're really, really like younger than they really are. Young in heart, young in spirit, just younger than. So they get really emotional. So, we let her go through that. So then I separated those classes. But then she started introducing me a lot of students. And next thing you know, I had a ton of students. I was making good coin because I wasn't charging my students much. I was only charging my students at the time 5,000 yen a month. Yes, 5,000 yen a month, which at that time was probably almost like $45 a month or something like that because the yen rate I think was up 120 yen to the buck at the time. And so because my price was so low, I kept getting more students. And they would send me students and then they would say, okay, Tony, we want you, can you do a demo for this one lady? She wants to know if she wants to join your class. I do demos, and then that day they're paying me. I'm like, oh, what, we're done? They said, yes, I got to take your class. So I had a lot of students. I think the max I had at one point was 200 students. And I was teaching 7 days a week. So what I would do is my weekends, I had like a Saturday morning class, and I had a Saturday evening class, and I had a Sunday class. And the Saturday evening class was in my house. I'll never forget, it was in my place where I lived. Sorry, I'm shaking. It was in the place where I lived. And the Saturday morning I would go to this other student's place. And then Sunday I had a class at this other student's house. And then, I taught the rest of the week. I'd drive all over the island to teach. And my schedule, like when I went in the Air Force, I was in the Air Force, I'd get up every day at 4:30. I'd be to work about 7. And then this is after I got on a set schedule because my last 5 years I was in the Air Force, I was able to work a straight, mostly day shift. And so that helped me out, helped me go to college, helped me do all these other activities. And I had mostly weekends off because I busted my ass to do that because I was really good at my job. So I became a trainer, and then I got a trainer schedule. I ended up being on team 1, the top team out of 48 teams in my field. In my job, on base. So I got myself in a pretty good position in the Air Force. So that helped me do other things on the side. So anyway, I'd get off work at 4. I'd head over to the college. My class would start at 4:45 and go till like say 7:30. And then I'd rush home, or sometimes 8, rush home, take a shower real quick, and then I'd head to my other class to teach more classes. So only time I would really have off is sometimes on the American holiday, but this schedule was like this for 5 consecutive years until I left. I made good coin. I was able to save a lot of money, but man, it was a lot of time. I spent a lot of time and effort teaching people. So now I get back to the States. Of course, I wasn't teaching in the States because there's no reason for me to teach there. And then I got bored and I went to Tokyo, and I gave myself 2 weeks to find a job. I found an English teaching job in 3 days. And I went on, before that, I went on many different interviews. I remember I went on this one interview with this guy in this place called Funabashi, which is in Chiba. I did not hit it off with that guy at all. I already knew that he wanted a big titty blonde to teach his kids or his classes or whatever. At the time, in the early 90s, that was 94. When the English teaching was hot and heavy in Japan. I hadn't known about Nova yet at the time. But so I was just trying to find any school I could get. I talked to a lot of Jukucho senseis, which is basically prep school owners. A few, they didn't hire me, or I didn't like them. And then I finally found this school out in Nagoya, which was actually out of Owase, Mie, but they had a school in Nagoya. I thought I was going to teach there. I got back to the States. The guy called me and said, hey, I want you to manage some teachers in a place called Matsuzaka Mie. I went there. I worked there for a year. I worked my ass off, like 16-hour days. I was doing demonstrations, classes for other prep school owners, and still teaching my class at night. So that was crazy. Excuse me. And at the time when they hired me, I know I'm covering a lot of information here. When they hired me at 250,000 yen to 250,000 yen a month. And like I said, that was back in '94, and it was a pretty good coin. I was probably about $2,800 a month. And then they made me what they called a seishain, which was a permanent employee. And so my pay dropped because, of course, now they put more money toward my benefits or whatnot. So I think my pay dropped to like 212,000 yen. And I was like, okay, that meant I was a full-time employee. I was permanent. I was no longer what they call a keiyakushain and a contract worker. But those hours just started beating me away. And then a year later, I went over to Osaka. And I remember this was how good it was to get an English teaching job back in the 90s, guys. This was 95. I kept seeing this school everywhere. Nova, I saw ECC, Aeon. They were the Berlitz. They were the big four. And Britannia was up there. There's so many English schools, but Nova was the big one by far. They were doing the most advertising. So what I did is I got myself a Rerec show, which is a resume set up Japanese style with my picture on and everything. And I had my own English resume printed out. And I went to Nova. I actually called them up and they said, okay, I want you to come in. And I showed up, and there was like 35 other people there sitting in this big room. And this one guy was talking to us about Nova. And then he had us fill all this paperwork out. And I was like, okay, so when are we going to get to the interview process? How does this work? And then next he says, okay, as soon as you get done with your paperwork, you hand over to me. I'm going to let you know what school you're going to be teaching out of. And I just looked around at everybody. I said, oh, shit. Are we getting hired? I just kind of whispered because I didn't want to mess things up. And next I got my paper and said, oh, yeah, you're going to be teaching at Tennoji in Osaka. And I was like, oh. And he had my days off on there, had my hours and everything. I'm like, yeah, you're a full-time English teacher. Because, you can have people who want to do part-time or full-time. I applied for full-time. Right on the spot, man. I went there. Within an hour, I had a job. And I was like, oh, shit. And, my work visa and everything was all good. So what happened was, I started teaching like that very next day, or a couple of the day after because I had to get myself set up. So the next day, because they said we're going to give you a trans pass. They actually paid for our transportation, so they gave me this little thing with the date on it. So I think the date was expired date, and then every month they would give me a new one. And all I'd do is go through boop 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 boop, and I'd get on the public transportation, and go. At that time they had it to where it went from point A to point B. So like from my house to wherever station I needed to get off to go to work. So I lived in southern Osaka at the time, and I would catch the train on the Nankai line and get off at the Shin Imamiya station, and then transfer from Shin Imamiya to one station over to Tennoji. So it was a really smooth ride for me. It was nice. I only had to transfer once, and only had to do one stop. And so I went there, and I worked in Tennoji for a couple years. And then Novanet called, and they I guess I was a very popular teacher. They would use me for demos all the time, and I would always get students to sign up. I mean, Nova was opening up a school like every week. They were opening up new schools, and there was so many students coming in to want to learn. And I didn't know at the time, but students would come in and pay 3 years in advance, and then they would just sign up for classes. But later on, I'll tell you what happened with that with Nova. But at first, it seemed like it worked. So I ended up at NovaNet, and that was in '96, and I was teaching on the internet. And I remember that they kept having all kind of issues, but I was teaching people up in Hokkaido, Chiba, all over Japan. And here I am in the middle. Me and 4 or 5 other teachers were teaching there. And we had this maintenance guy wandering around. If we had an internet issue or something like that, hey, we would call him up and he'd come over to the computer. I mean, literally, this guy was busting his ass. They would be calling him up like every few minutes. Different teachers would call him. I got a problem with this, got a problem with that. And while I was there, on my spare time, they had me design like lesson background, like illustrations for lessons. I mean, I did backgrounds. And I got really good at that. And I think that was my first, I was using Adobe Photoshop 4.0. And that was my first real work into design, and later on as I became an IT guy, of course, and a web developer, software engineer guy. So that helped me out a lot for later on. So anyway, what I'm getting at is this. Those were the golden days of teaching English. They were the golden days. You had so many people coming in from England, from Canada, Australia, US, New Zealand, South Africa. Any English-speaking countries only were coming in. At that time, Japanese students did not want to be taught English by someone from the Philippines or who did not look like they spoke English. And, or had the accent, like I have the American accent, right? And, you have the people with the British accent and with the Australian accent. And, I used to be able to talk like my Aussie friends and my Kiwi friends, but I kind of refrain from that right now. I'm not in the mood to be up there pissing off my Aussie guys. And one thing I want to say about my Aussie people and my New Zealand, my Kiwi guys, I'm related to a lot of you guys. I've been checking Ancestry.com. Don't be surprised if I'm your cousin. Because I know a lot of cousins in Australia that I've been hooking up with in New Zealand. So you don't be surprised, right? So anyway, they would only hire teachers from those countries. Now, I left the English teaching world forever in 97 when I was hired in Saudi Arabia to train the Saudis on what I did in the military, which was really good pay and really good benefits and whatnot. So that's what got me out of that. But I did keep in touch with my English teaching friends and whatnot. And I know a lot of my friends at Nova actually stayed. And some of them, unfortunately, overstayed. So what I'm getting at is this. And I'm trying to keep this video short. I may have to do a part 2. Because I don't like my videos going too long. I'm already at 16, 17 minutes now. And I got a lot to cover with this. So this may turn into a part 2. I mean, it's going to be a whole episode, but a whole thing. But this is just talking about the English teaching world. So, okay, so 97 hit. Those guys were there. Nova was hot and heavy. They were still growing. Ekimai Ryugaki was blowing up every week like they were. They opened them schools. And what I would do, by the way, when I was there, on my days off, I would still teach. I'd get up in the morning. I'd call in. I need to make some extra coin. I'd call in. And I'd call him head off and say, yeah, we got a class. We need you in Nara. We need you at this school in Kyoto or this school in Nishinomiya or Osaka. Or so I was taking the train all over the place. And then when I get there, when I'm done, they would pay me my fare to get back home for what I use. Because I'd spend money and they pay me the money. They reimbursed me. And I was making some good coin that way. I was working pretty much every day of the week when I was on that for like 3 years. Excuse me, 3.5 years. So, anyway, that was then. And then 2005 rolled around, and I had ended up just back up in Seattle area through my move. I was, like I said, the cycle of life. I ended up back there because that's where I liked. Eventually, I wanted to go back anyway, but circumstances didn't allow me to go back earlier. But I ended up back there. So what happened was I had. I think that was actually 2006. Yeah, 2006. When I was dating my wife. My wife was back in Japan in college, and so I was thinking, you know what? I want to live in Japan again because I want to be with her, and I knew she was going to be able to get a nice job when she got out of college. So I remember interviewing at the Red Lion Hotel in 2006 at Fort Nova. Yes. Because also Nova had places in London, Vancouver, California, somewhere, different major hubs overseas to recruit teachers. They got that big. So we went through, it was like a lot of people, it was like about 15, 20 people in there, man, going through the thing. We gave a briefing, we saw Nova, we handed our resumes and everything like that. It was like a big interview. They asked us why you want to go back, why you want to teach at Nova, why you want to live in Japan, blase, blase. So, I did all my stuff. I went home and I was thinking, yeah, I got this. I'm going to get this. But I was thinking at the same time, how the fuck am I going to move over there? Because I just picked up my Porsche a year earlier. I was leasing a Porsche Boxer S. I was in the car sales. I wasn't really making as much money. I was making enough. And I had this mortgage. I had this new condo I bought a year earlier. And I was like, what the hell am I going to do with all this shit? Right? But I figured out, okay, my condo, I ran it out. My Porsche, I'll just turn it back in, whatever. So I was confident. I was like, yeah, I'm getting this job. Well, I got a notice email or some shit a few weeks later saying that I did not get the job. And I was kind of shocked. I was like, oh shit, what's going on with this? Back in the day, it would be a wrap. I mean, I'm done. It wouldn't have been an interview. It would have been like, okay, you ready to go? We're going to send you over. And do you know, a few months later, Nova filed for bankruptcy. Nova filed for bankruptcy a few months later, yes, in 2006. Yes, I could be wrong, but I could be a year off, but I think it was 2006 that they filed for bankruptcy, because I remember, when I was working Nova, and then I was working at the Nova headquarters, and I remember meeting the owner, the founder. It was this guy, the Japanese guy, who he met up with this big Swedish dude named Anders, who was like the top gaijin of the company at the headquarters, because he had met him in Sweden and Europe, and I guess they hit it off. And then they when he started the English school, Anders was the first guy he hired on, so that's why he was the big wig. But the owner was an asshole. You see him in the elevator. I used to be bowing, trying to be a people pleaser before, like I used to be, bowing to him and everything, because I thought it was so, the owner of Nova, wow, the biggest school in Japan. But he was an asshole. He wasn't that friendly or nothing. And then I found out during the bankruptcy later on, what happened was he was ripping people off. He was spending money that he shouldn't have been spending. And students were paying 3 years in advance, but they wasn't able to always get the classes. That's what happened. They started complaining to the government that, hey, I'm paying for these classes, but I'm not able to take these classes because Nova never had enough teachers. They couldn't hire teachers fast enough. And students started picking up on that. And then when they would hire teachers, the turnover was so big, because even though the pay was good, the management at Nova sucked. Because they literally had a lot of teachers that they were making managers that had no business being managers. But they were managers. You get a guy off the boat from Canada, next you know, he's teaching for a year. Now he's a manager. Get out of here, right? No management experience whatsoever. These are young 21, 22-year-old guys coming out of college, or women coming out of college. And then next you know, they're managing the school or managing a region. They had no clue. So that really sapped the morale at Nova. So, I mean, they used to call it the McDonald's of Japan, but, like I said, they had a lot of jobs. You can always get a job over there. Well, not in 2006. And so what they did was they broke up, and then some other company came in and bought, like, some of the schools. Not all the schools, but some of the schools. And then they scaled down. So let's fast forward to I'm going to go back to 2022. Because I met this guy on the internet through a group that I belonged to. He was from England, and this was in the summer of 2022. And I remember talking to him about he really wanted to work in Japan badly, because our group was talking about Japan all the time. This is our group of black men that wanted to get to Japan. They're like, oh my God, I got to get to Japan really bad. How do I do this? And so, I found that this guy had a college degree, and he's from England. And so I recommended Nova. But I also told him that Nova didn't have a good reputation for working there. They did not have a good reputation. Because I think over the years before they went bankrupt, people were trying to unionize, because Nova was treating their teachers bad. So they tried to get the union. All kind of shit started kicking off in like the 90s, actually. 90s, 97, 98, that's when they tried to get the union thing going. But they never did it. It never worked. So anyway, he's there. So he went in and he applied to Nova. He applied to other schools. Then he got hired on at Nova. But it was a pandemic going, and they kept delaying him. And I said, well, why are they delaying you? He said, well, they said because they don't have anything in the big cities right now. I said, tell them you'll teach anywhere. I said, you don't have to work in the big cities. Tell them you'll work anywhere. If you really want to go to Japan that bad, just tell Nova you'll work anywhere. So he did. He got a response back. They said, okay, we're going to put you in the school in Kumamoto, right? So November or early December, because I remember that early December, because we went to Japan in like late December that year, and we stayed for like 18 days with our family. So we just missed him by a few days. So he got there, like he was in Osaka training at the Nova place, and then he shipped off to Kumamoto. We went to Japan. We get back to the States. He's complaining about the fact that he's not getting paid that much, because he really wasn't. Nova really doesn't pay the teachers well at all. Before, when I was there, and back in the heyday, we would get paid no matter what. And, of course, we get our lessons. So sometimes you get your classes canceled and you do other things, but you still got paid. But now they say that Nova pays you per lesson that you teach. And the last I checked, one of my friends was saying that he was only getting like 190,000 yen a month, which is shit money. I mean, you can live on that money in Japan, but you're not going to be sending the money home. And with the yen being where it's at, $1.90 ain't much, baby. You lucky if it's $1,200 a month. That's banana money in most places. In the U.S., you can't even breathe on that money, right? So that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm trying to tell you guys. That money is no longer there. So this guy gets to Kumamoto, and so he was working there. He was only working in Kumamoto for a few weeks, and then he had a complaint against him. Because what he did was he violated Nova's rules. He went ahead and gave his phone number to some student. Nova has a policy where no matter what, you do not interact with the students off duty. You don't do that. Some people, a lot of people did. One of my friends married a student, and he's still married today. They have 2 beautiful kids, but they kept it secret. They kept it discreet. So people knew they were doing it as long as you didn't let it out there. And of course, a lot of the staff at Nova would marry teachers too. Because every school I used to work at had some pretty girls, 21, 22, 23-year-old women just there working as a staff, and you knew they were just ready for you to pick them up. And they were. Back in the 90s, it would, trust me. Yeah, that's what it was. But anyway, so he gets there, and he goes through these things at Nova. He eventually gets fired. So in the process, they basically told him that you're going to have to leave by this certain date. So I think they gave him like a month or two, or not a month or two, but 2 weeks to a month to stay on to get the rest of his pay. So meanwhile, he fired off a lot of resumes with a lot of schools. Aeon, ECC, Interact, other companies out there. They even got this company called Hello English, which I'll get into. I am going to do another video on this one. But he fired him off, and I'm going to go ahead and shut this down. I'm going to do a part 2. I'm going to let you know what happened with him and going forward, what is happening in the English teaching world. This is BSP, and I'm here to tell you this is part 1 of English teaching has no future in Japan. BSP out.